Vital questions. The first is this: which countries show an unwillingness to take the fight to ISIL? Well, as I said to my producer just before the show, it would be much shorter to list those countries that were showing any willingness at all seriously to fight ISIL. And that's an issue that I have come to a startling conclusion about. Not being an aficionado of conspiracy theories in general, I have been resistant to embrace the idea that the Western countries who talk most about ISIL are actually helping facilitate their military victories. I really didn't want to believe that, even though I've lived long enough to know when they did in the past with similar organizations, principally in Afghanistan through the 1980s. But I have now come to a startling conclusion, and it is this: that the Western countries and their so-called coalition of the willing that are supposedly trying to crush the ISIL civil wars in Syria and in Iraq are in fact helping them. And I have many reasons to come to that conclusion. But I'll give you just one, startling or not. ISIL now controls more than 50% of Syria. Syria is the next door neighbor of Israel. Now, if Israel seriously wanted to stop ISIL taking over Damascus and capturing the rest of Syria, they would already be at the United Nations. Netanyahu would be holding up his diagrams, and they'd be shouting from the rooftops about the mortal threat that they were facing from ISIL. But they are not. As a matter of fact, they boast that they are giving medical help to ISIL fighters in the occupied Golan Heights. Israel is bombing those who are fighting against Israel, but never has sought to bomb ISIL. ISIL have never thrown as much as a stone at Israel. So I conclude that Israel does not want to stop ISIL conquering Damascus and capturing all of Syria. Now, how on earth might that be? And the United States and its so-called coalition allies are actually mounting an absolutely desultory air campaign, which actually only really sparks into life when the interests of their allies in the Kurdish movements are threatened. The only serious bombing of ISIL that has happened has been at Kobani in the Kurdish area of Syria and on Erbil on the Kurdish border with the rest of Iraq. For the rest of it, it has been, and I quote the former head of the United States Armed Forces, of a different order of magnitude to the bombardment, say, of Yugoslavia, a European country that was mercilessly bombarded by NATO forces in the 1990s. Actually, the bombardment of ISIL has been a mere fraction of the bombardment of Yugoslavia. And by comparison with, for example, Israeli bombardment of Gaza last summer, well, the Israeli bombardment was 100 times greater. So a desultory sortie or two per day hitting sand in the desert does not constitute a willingness to fight ISIL. As a matter of fact, the coalition, as the Iranian foreign minister said today, has not succeeded. I would go much, much further than that. I would say that the US-led coalition has not only not succeeded, it has been deliberately designed to fail. And what they're seeking, at the very least, is a new country as a buffer zone between Baghdad and Damascus, one which they hope will be a state that they can bend to their purposes. That's my view. Which countries show an unwillingness to fight ISIL? Just about all of them.